your source for everything paranormal. Paranormal. Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. I'm Barry Strohm, your host. I hope you know by now that we're the only show where we speak to important spirits that have made history. We're brought to you every week on Sundays by the ParaX Radio Network.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to our show this evening. Tonight, we'll be channeling the spirit of Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. I think you'll be very interested in all of his accomplishments. We have him to thank for most of the national parks and forests that are protected from development, and which I love big time. We've prepared questions for our guest tonight, but hope that those of you in the chat room will give us some questions as well.
Okay, we always try to give a small disclaimer when we begin, as we've had absolutely no idea how the spirit guests are going to answer our questions or give the opinions. So the opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the ParaX Network, or of our sponsors.
Last week, we channeled the spirit of Martin Luther, the individual responsible for the Protestant Reformation. A couple of weeks ago, we even channeled the spirit of the Prophet Muhammad. This was the third channeling of the Prophet, and if you take time to listen, you will get a much better understanding of the Muslim faith. You can listen to all of our channelings on our YouTube channel. That's in the name of Barry Strohm. We currently have over 200 videos available for viewing.
Okay, tonight you will have the rare opportunity to submit questions to President Theodore Roosevelt. His progressive principles have had a great effect on all of our current lives. We always welcome thoughtful contributions to our questions through the ParaX chat room. If you've listened to our show, you also know that before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection. There's evil out there. We want to make sure that we're protected because we are opening a channel to the other side. Now, Connie will say the prayer, and we will get on with channeling our spirit guest.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Well, welcome, President Roosevelt. By the way, I'm going to be referring to him as Teddy, and that's not being disrespectful. That's what he gave me permission to do. So, Teddy, would you like to begin with a message for our listeners?
Absolutely. Did you ever see a politician that would turn down a chance to speak to listeners? In my day, we didn't even have radio, so we had to speak quite loudly. But I tried to give many, many speeches, and through my political career, I truly did that. I was chosen to lead at another very difficult time in the history of the United States. We were just coming out of the Industrial Revolution. Many things were changing. Large companies had set up monopolies that they could control much of the important railways, our oil supplies. There was much evil in government, just the same as you have evil in government today. When I took over, I pledged to myself that I would do my best to give everybody a fair chance, to try to help the poor, and to break the monopolies that were driving prices high for the average person. I did my best as president. I had many enemies, but I also had many friends. I think that as I look back, I did a pretty good job. I am very proud of the fact that there are now many national parks and national forests for so many people to enjoy. There were those that wanted to develop some of that beauty. Can you imagine having a hotel in Yosemite, sitting at the base of some of the most beautiful mountains in the world? I wanted to control all of it. I realized that we expanded government to gain that control, but there are both good and bad aspects of what we did. So, Connie, I'm ready to answer your questions. Would you mind beginning? And away we go.
Okay, let's start out with you telling us about your parents.
My parents were fairly important people. They were wealthy. My father was a very important politician of his own. He was able to give us a fine home and a fine education. They were actually very wonderful people. I was very close to my mother. She taught me much. She led me to the high moral standards that I was trying to bring to government. There was much about my family to be admired, and I must say that I had a wonderful childhood.
Okay, could you tell us about your health as a child?
I actually had a very sickly childhood. I suffered from very advanced asthma. My eyesight was not that good. It was so bad, as a matter of fact, that my parents chose to teach me at home. Thankfully, they were wealthy enough that they could do that, and I did receive a great education. After finding out that the doctors thought that I would not be able to be very active, I decided that I would begin to live a life of very strenuous exercise. As it turned out, the exercise program that I participated in was the best thing that could have happened for me, and I actually lived a good long life.
How did you overcome your asthma?
Exercise. I tried to overcome all of my weaknesses by gaining physical strength in my body. I would do breathing exercises. I would try to run. I would do a little bit more every day. And I got myself into very, very good physical condition. I even learned to box. Of course, there were some of those that were much better than I was, but I competed in boxing. I did many things. I did everything that I could think of that I thought would help me to gain better physical conditioning.
How did your health affect your education?
Well, as I stated earlier, I was forced to be homeschooled. My parents did that. They brought me some of the best tutors available, and they taught me many, many different things.
Okay, we've got questions coming in already on the chat room, so let me put one of them out. One of our listeners would like to know if you're psychic and a soul of the family of God, and if you are part of the God soul family, what's it like on your level of heaven?
I'm not truly a member of the soul family of God as yet, but I am in a very high portion of the 6th level. I have tried to serve many, many people. I have been sent back by the angels and by my guides to do many different things for many different people. I am in a very comfortable level, but I would relish the chance to return. I hope that I will be able to do things that will help others when I do decide to come back. But I am close, but I'm still not considered part of the soul family of God.
Okay, your name was Theodore. So how did Theodore get translated to Teddy?
Well, that's kind of a bit of a story. I was on a hunting trip, and I had not been able to find a bear that was suitable for me to shoot. I was always a true sportsman. The people that were with me trapped the bear and actually tied it to a tree and told me to come shoot it so that I could have the publicity of a successful hunt. I told him that there was absolutely no way that I would do such a thing and that was very unsportsmanlike. The bear was released and returned to the woods. News of the fact that I'd saved the bear's life got into the newspapers, and an individual with a toy company started to make a small bear, and he named it Teddy in my honor because of the incident that he had read in the paper about the bear hunt. The bear became very popular because at that time I was very popular, and hence the name Teddy rubbed off, and I guess I'm named after a toy bear.
How did you feel about having a bear named after you?
Actually, I enjoyed it. There was nothing I enjoyed more than being in the mountains and the woods and hunting. And the people actually used the name Teddy as a term of endearment. It didn't bother me at all.
Okay. You graduated from Harvard in 1880. How does your education then compare with Harvard education today?
When I went to Harvard, we were taught many, many different subjects. We had debate clubs. I would have an opinion and be challenged by others, and we had open conversations. It was a progressive school at the time and very highly regarded. Today, Harvard is obviously very well regarded, but I think that they are taking too many political positions and not giving their students a true opportunity to discuss and to learn different points of view. I believe that the graduates of Harvard come out with very similar understandings of the world around them.
You attended Columbia Law. Why did you quit and not become an attorney?
Well, first of all, I wasn't really enjoying law school, but I decided that I wanted to run for public office. My desire was always to help others. I knew that there were many people hurting in the country at the time, and I felt that if I became involved in politics, especially the politics of the state of New York in which I was living, in those days, politics was a very, very dirty game. There were political bosses that controlled many of the elections. They would control the candidates. They would control what they said. They controlled the programs. I felt that I wanted to become involved and try to make changes in the political system. So I quit law school and began to run for political office.
Okay, 1884 was a very sad year for you. Your mother and your wife both died on the same day. How did that affect your life?
I was devastated. I loved my first wife very much. She had given birth to our daughter and died 2 days later. It was such a bittersweet moment. My mother actually passed on the same day, and I was very close to her. I decided that I would quit politics and move west and try to change my life and to do things that would take my mind off of all the personal disasters that I just suffered. I went to the Dakotas. I bought a ranch out there. I learned how to be a ranch hand. I rode horses. I enjoyed the wilderness. I hunted. I did everything I could do to take the grief out of my heart. It was indeed a truly difficult time for me.
Yeah. What inspired you to return to political life?
All of the corruption. As I would sit out here in my ranch, I would read the papers from back east, having been involved in politics for a while, I had a pretty good understanding of what was taking place. And I truly felt that the people needed an honest man in politics. I decided I would go back and I would run for office. Sometimes I would lose, sometimes I would win. But all of my life, I truly had a desire to serve the people of the country.
Okay, Teddy, when you were Secretary of War, why did you favor war with Spain?
I felt that Spain interfered with what was best for the North and South American continents. They had a presence in Cuba. They were they were controlling quite a bit in South America. The Monroe Doctrine was something that I strongly believed in. I felt that in order to truly be safe, the United States had to have interactions with political activities in the other countries. Spain was not a good friend at that time. They were trying to look out for their own interests. And I truly felt that for the United States to prosper, it would be in our interest to control what was taking place in our own hemisphere.
Okay, the sinking of the battleship Maine became the reason to declare war with Spain. What really happened to the Maine?
The battleship Maine actually suffered an internal explosion. One of the boilers exploded. It was a convenient opportunity, since nobody really understood what had taken place, to blame the Spanish for sinking of the Maine. The newspapers jumped on the story, and the words "Remember the Maine" were in all the headlines. When we truly learned what had taken place, I guess I was wrong, but I decided that we would not change the impression that the newspapers had made upon the people.
Okay, could you tell us about the Rough Riders?
When war was declared on Spain, we were going to invade Cuba. Cuba at that time was the stronghold of Spanish control. I formed a group of cavalrymen. They were good horsemen. They were from all walks of life. We had cowboys. We had ex-soldiers. We had a very, very tough fighting force that we put together. We were sent over to Cuba, and the men fought very gallantly. We actually suffered not a whole lot of resistance over there. We had such military power that we just simply overpowered the Spanish forces in Cuba.
Could you tell us about the charge up Kettle Hill during the Battle of Santiago?
I had always wanted to be very close to combat. My poor physical condition of my youth, my vision problems, all of these things I felt I wanted to overcome personally. The Spanish were entrenched on the top of Kettle Hill. We charged them. I led the charge up the hill. We overcame their fortifications and defeated them. The Battle of San Juan Hill was a very popular thing for the newspapers at the time. The newspapers wanted to show that we did have military superiority and that the best thing for our country would be to have a strong military. So I came back, many people had read about it, and my participation in the Spanish-American War was a huge benefit for my political career at the time.
You were nominated for the Congressional Medal of Honor. Did you believe that you deserved it?
No. I knew that being nominated would be good for my political career, but there were many others that were also fought bravely at the time. I did lead the charge, and I guess that was very unusual for a politician at that time. There were still people that remembered the Civil War from many years before, and there were many people that fought in that war that did much more than I did.
Okay, we're getting a bunch of questions, and they're getting away from me. How did your military service affect your political future?
Well, as I said, the newspapers played up my role. They made me out to be a gigantic hero leading my forces on foot. When I returned, the people understood that I now had some name recognition, and I began to be very successful in the offices that I ran for politically.
In 1898, you were elected governor of New York. What type of policies did you pursue as governor?
I tried my best to end the corruption in government. I tried to work with the police departments. I tried to get rid of all the bad cops that were out there. Payoffs were everywhere when I took office as governor. I tried to make the state of New York as honest as possible.
How did the party bosses react to your policies as governor?
They were very irritated. I had been elected by a fairly good majority, and they knew that there wasn't much that they could do to defeat me in the state at the time. So they actually drafted me to run for vice president. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but the party bosses at the time told me that if I did not accept the draft to run for vice president, that it would have very harsh consequences on my political career in the future. So I accepted it, and I was vice president.
Okay, chat room for a second. Can you talk about the formation and the downfall of the Bull Moose Party?
When I had been after I was president, I had been very upset with the trend that was taking place in the government. I had been as president, I had pushed some very progressive ideas and policies. The political bosses had decided on the Republican candidate, so I knew that I could not run on the Republican ticket. I created the Bull Moose Party as a third party, and I ran as president in the Bull Moose Party on my progressive ideals.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It was a very difficult time for third party. We got many, many votes, and we actually came fairly close, but we didn't come that close in the Electoral College. After our defeat, we decided that perhaps the existence of a third party in the future would not be beneficial for those that would run for office.
Okay, back in those days, what were the responsibilities of a vice president?
They had almost no responsibilities. The president made the decision, and the president basically ran the country with the Congress. In those days, Congress was very, very strong. When I came into office, I tried to expand the powers of the presidency. I made a lot of executive orders, and I actually took a lot of the power from Congress.
How long were you vice president?
I was only about president for about 9 months. When the president was assassinated, I was sworn in and completed over 3 years of his term. I then ran for re-election, and the people supported me. So my career as vice president was actually very short.
How did you respond to being president at the tender age of 43?
I loved it. I was very healthy. I had great strength. I had a lot of ambition. And I had a lot of ideas that I thought was best for the country. I thought that being president was actually a young man's job. Even in my day, it was very, very strenuous to be the president of the United States.
Okay, you were a proponent of the square deal. Will you tell us about that policy?
I knew that there was a wide gap between the rich and the poor in the United States. The powerful were taking advantages of the poor. I felt truly that all men were created equal, and I wanted the individuals in the lower, shall we say, class of citizenry, the poor, people that had very little control over the politics. I wanted them to receive the same treatment. I wanted all individuals in the United States to be treated equally. There were times that the justice system did not serve the poor, just as the justice system, in many instances, is not serving the poor today. I wanted everyone to have a square deal.
What role did the country of Colombia play in the construction of the Panama Canal?
Well, Panama was actually a part of Colombia at one time. Colombia was not in favor of an independent Panama and the canal that we were intending to build. It was a time that we needed to get our ships into the Pacific as rapidly as possible. And I felt that the Panama Canal was one of the most important projects that we could work upon at that time. Colombia actually tried to bring troops in, and we used our Navy to blockade them. Colombia was not exactly my friend during that period.
Okay, you were a Republican, but championed progressive ideas. Were your policies not in conflict with the Republican Party?
My policies were relatively new to the Republican Party, but they also realized that times were changing. They realized that there were many things that could be done for the people, and if those things were done, then it would be a great thing in the future for the future of the party. Keep in mind that in the history of our country, the roles were sometimes reversed between the Democrat and Republican Party. For instance, it was the Republican Party that wanted to get rid of slavery, and it was the Democratic Party that resisted it. So the modern breakout of conservative and progressivism in today's political arena is much different than what it was during my time. Okay, it's time to take a small break here. We'll be back in a very short period of time, and we will have many, many more questions for President Roosevelt.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Marla Brooks from Stirring the Cauldron. Thursdays are a great night on the Para-X Radio Network. We start off the evening with Journey into the Light, Chapter 3, with your hosts, Psychic Little T and Tabby Cat Gash at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then, on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m., it's Tango and Friends, hosted by Bruce Tango. And on the alternate Thursdays at 8 p.m., tune in to Stirring the Cauldron, the Archive podcast. Every week at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me on Stirring the Cauldron Live. And then at 10 p.m., stick around for New Aeon Now with Lily Alley, Davron Michaels, and Christine Matza. Finally, to round out the night, join Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Paranormal Encounters podcast. All this every Thursday, right here on Para-X.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Connie, let's do some more questions.
Okay, let's start with some of the questions in our chat room. One of our listeners would like to know, did you have anything to do with McKinley's assassination?
Absolutely not. It was a whack job that was responsible for it, and I had nothing to do with it.
And another one would like to know, what do you think of President Carter giving away the Panama Canal?
I felt that it was a poor decision. I know that the people of Panama wanted to gain control of it, and I realized that there were plenty of members of the Liberal Party and that also felt that we should give back, but I think that it would have been best if we would have maintained control.
What do you think of our two-party system today and all that's going on in it?
The Democrats and Republicans have developed such an hatred that it is very difficult for me to understand if anything good can really take place. The country is split down the middle right now. There are people on both sides of the fence. Neither party truly has got a majority that they can be proud of. Instead of cooperating and trying to work out things, which would have been the common sense approach at this time, they have both become adversaries, and the result has been increasing the split in the people of the United States, and nothing truly has been worked out as any compromises.
What can the Americans do about this? Is there anything we can do to get things right again?
The voters generally can figure things out. What they have to do is send people to Congress that are more interested in the people of the country than they are in their own political power. The size of government has become so incredibly huge that it is almost uncontrollable. Huge amounts of monies are being wasted. There are many areas where inefficiencies are just squandering tax dollars. And both parties have decided that they want to continue to spend far beyond the means of the people and the tax dollars of which they're taking in. There will be a time of reckoning if the parties do not decide to cooperate, show fiscal responsibility, and do what is best for the people of the country.
You were the father of progressivism in the government. Do you have any regrets for leading the government towards progressive programs?
I did what I truly felt was right. In the early 1900s, the United States needed programs that protected the people. The wealthy, the monopolies, they were all taking advantage of the people. To create some of the programs that I did were very progressive for the times. The times have changed. Progressive ideals in this modern time are very expensive. In my day, we could anticipate the costs and try to be more physically responsible. Today, the programs are so incredibly expensive. Yes, there are many things that I would like to see done for the people. There are many people living in poverty. Many people in the inner cities are in the lowest poverty levels. They are given lousy educations. And education is the key to hope. I would much rather see the government step back and think about what the best educational system for the poor areas of the country would be. Today, some of the progressive programs, even though the people behind them mean well, those programs could mean financial ruin for the country.
After listening to you for 37 minutes, one of our listeners would like to know if you would consider coming back and running for president again.
Well, crossed my mind. But sadly, it would take, if I decided to come back, it would probably take 50 years before I'd be able to run for president. So I think the decisions are pretty well made in what future generations will face. I worry that the institutions are putting in ideas of socialism and communism into the minds of the young. Keep in mind that it is the individuals that are in the colleges of today that will become the leaders of tomorrow.
Yes, it's frightening. What was your position on civil rights?
I was always a very strong advocate of civil rights. Now, that being said, there were times that being an advocate of civil rights was very politically unpopular. There was much segregation in the South, and the Southern Democrats were very much opposed to ending segregation. I tried to introduce the concept in several ways. Every time I would do it, we would get great political blowback. I did do as much as I could, or as I felt that I could do at the time. I was trying to do many, many different things, and I needed to have the support of some of the Southern Democrats for some of my programs. So it was probably one of my failings that I didn't push civil rights much harder. But I knew that we had just fought a huge civil war over civil rights, and there was still so much animosity left over from that there were times that I just felt I could not push the program.
What happened when you invited Booker T. Washington, an African American, to the White House?
all hell broke loose. The newspapers, the Southern Democrats, everybody was so opposed to the fact that I would actually have an African American have dinner in the White House. Sadly, it was a sign of the times, and even though I did meet with Booker in the future, we never would meet in the White House.
Okay, what was your position on a woman's right to vote?
I felt very strongly that women should have the right to vote. I did not like the fact that women were treated as secondary citizens. I had great respect for women. My wife was a very strong woman. She ran the family. She did many things. She was a great first lady. I wanted the women to be on an equal footing. My concept of women's rights also wanted to give them a square deal as well.
You became known as an anti-corporate crusader who broke up the monopolies. Why did you consider such actions so important?
I knew that if the monopolies were allowed to continue to exist, they would destroy the economic structure of the country. The Sherman Antitrust Act had not been utilized to its fullest extent, so I felt I would use that. I knew that Standard Oil was gouging prices, and I knew that with our emerging economy, we needed to keep the price of oil as low as possible. The railroads were instrumental in those days. Keep in mind, there were no interstate highways or roads where trucks could haul across. We didn't even have trucks in the beginning. The railroads were key to the expansion of our country, and we needed to keep shipping rates reasonable if the rails were going to support Western expansion. The railroads were built through federal funding, and I was determined that since we paid for the damn things, that they would help everybody in the country, not just the rich.
How did you overcome the resistance to breaking up the monopolies?
It was very difficult. I had to do a lot with executive orders. Until the time that I was president, the men that came before me had used executive orders. I felt that I would push the limits with them, and that I would force people to go to the courts to stop some of the things that I was doing.
What monopolies do you feel should be broken up today?
I think that the monopolies in the news industry and on the internet are a great danger to your First Amendment rights. Very few individuals actually control the news and control what people can do on the internet. I think it is inevitable that in the futures, that companies like Facebook, Twitter, the companies that are using their platforms to bring their concepts and ideas and limit the words of other people, I think that they're the ones that will need to face the brunt of legal action in the future and bring a square deal to the people that rely upon the internet for information.
Okay, a quick question from one of our listeners. Were there any UFO sightings that you were aware of when you were president?
I had never seen one personally. Nothing that I could prove. I had seen things when I was on wilderness trips. Keep in mind that when you're in the wilderness, you can see much more of the sky than you can do in the lights of the city. I thought that I saw things that I could not understand. I did have individuals tell me that there had been interactions in the past, and there were some events that did take place, but my advisors recommended that such events were kept from the public because they had such great fear and they really had no way to comprehend what was really taking place around them.
Yeah. Okay, one other listener would like to know, said you died at the age of 60. What was the true cause of your death?
I had declining health. I was, as I grew older, I had contacted a fever down when I was trying to explore the Amazon. It took a lot out of me and weakened my resistance. The doctor had told me in my youth that I'd had a weak heart. As I lost the ability to exercise and keep myself up to date in my physical program, my health just steadily deteriorated, and I actually died of an embolism.
Okay, did you believe that there was a threat of a revolution by members of the lower class of the United States?
Absolutely. In those days, keep in mind that the Western migration thrived upon rugged individualism and the rights of the people to do pretty much as they were guaranteed in the Constitution. I felt that if the monopolies and the rich and members of the government continued to take advantage of the people in the lower financial classes, that there would be a time that they would rise up and use force to attempt to gain the square deal that I was working to give them.
Yeah. Do you still believe that a revolution might be possible in the United States today?
I think that it is much more difficult, but I do think that it's possible. I know that the younger generation does not conceive of the personal liberties that we enjoyed. I know that their educations are teaching them possibly to use physical force. I know we are seeing some of the young with organizations like Antifa doing violence. I do believe that it's a possibility, but I do believe that it will not come from the individuals that believe in a more conservative type of government. What I'm seeing today is violence being used for more liberal ideas. With the existence of the National Guards and the strong police forces that we have, it would be much more difficult to have a violent uprising today.
You greatly expanded the powers of the executive branch of government. Looking at our present governmental system, do you have any regrets for expanding the powers of the president?
Perhaps I should not have done some of the things that I did, and I truly did expand the powers of the president. Today, it is almost a science to see how the presidents can avoid getting the approval of Congress. I wish that all of the politicians would step back and look at the concept of equal power of all three branches of government.
Perhaps your greatest achievement was conserving our natural resources. You designated more than 230 million acres as public lands. Do you consider this your greatest achievement?
Probably. I wanted to assure that people in the future would be able to see the gorgeous things that I was able to go see. I stretched the limits, and I was quite successful in turning many of the wilderness areas over to government control. Yes, I would say it was probably my finest achievement.
I would not argue with that. When you left the presidency, your friend William Howard Taft became president. What did you think of his policies as president?
In the beginning, I thought that he was going to pursue many of my progressive ideas, but I soon realized that he was not carrying out many of the things that I thought he would do. So we became political, shall we say, enemies, and by the end of his term, I was in strong disagreement with him.
What did you think about Wilson's policy of neutrality concerning the war in Europe?
I thought it was a terrible idea. I felt that if the United States had become involved in World War I at an earlier time, it could have been ended sooner.
Okay. Did you really go skinny dipping in the Potomac River?
Absolutely. Why not? I would be on excursions along the Potomac. It was hot. God knows how hot it is in Washington, D.C. So I would take the opportunity to cool off.
Okay. Could you tell us about when you received the Nobel Peace Prize?
Japan and Russia were at each other's throats. There was a chance that their disagreements could turn into a huge problem for all of us. I tried to intercede, and I was successful in having them come up with a compromise agreement that prevented a major war.
What was the importance of the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act of 1906?
In those days, there were no controls on the food or the meats. They were selling contaminated foods. They were selling contaminated meats. There was no control on drugs. People could make any claims they wanted. It was a time that I felt the government needed to intercede and assure that the people would have healthy food to eat, non-contaminated items, and that they would know that the drugs that they were taking were pure and not contaminated.
Do you believe the federal government or the states should control the security of elections?
There are many things in which I believe in states' rights. I know that was a strong concept for the Founding Fathers, and I believe that election security should best be left in the hands of the states, since they have a far better understanding of their populations and what needs to be done.
Which do you believe is more important, the First or the Second Amendment?
That's a very difficult question. Freedom of speech is imperative for the country to exist. But I also strongly believe that people should be allowed to defend themselves. I know that there are many people that would like to take firearms away from the common citizens. Many people use them to hunt. Many people use them to feel secure. And at a time when many of the municipalities are trying to decrease police protection, the Second Amendment is vital to many individuals. I would say that both of them are critical.
Are you planning to reincarnate anytime soon?
It's a strong possibility. I'm truly thinking about coming back, and I'm guessing that it will take place in the fairly near future.
Okay, Teddy, thank you so much for a most interesting evening. Do you have a final message for our listeners?
Yes. Once again, thank you for allowing me to come through. I tried to lead in a progressive manner. I knew that the common person had to be protected. I knew that the monopolies had to come to an end so that prices would remain reasonable. I knew that there were areas that the government had to intervene to assure clean food and healthy drugs. Today, your government has grown at an incredible pace. There are many areas where I think that projects or items are being overregulated. I know that I led the charge towards larger government during my time, but there is also a time that government growth has to be controlled, and you currently have agencies that should probably be eliminated. You need fiscal responsibility coming into the future. If you do not take the money in, you should not spend it. I hope that in the future, your political parties will become better at cooperating. I hope that they will decide that they should work together for the good of the people. Today, you have many politicians that are simply interested in wealth and power. Politics today is a very wealthy man's game. Money controls many of the decisions that are made in government. There are lobbying firms that spend incredible amounts of dollars. Foreign countries spend huge sums of money to influence things that will favor them. I truly hope that your government takes a step back and decides what is best for the long term of the country. I love the United States. It's a place of incredible beauty, and it's a place of incredible people. So thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Should you wish me to come back, I would be more than happy to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Next week, we're going to interview the spirit of Thomas Edison. We've already interviewed the spirit of Mr. Tesla, and I'm going to be asking some very interesting questions concerning their relationships. You can submit your own questions or recommendations for future shows in advance through our email, channelinghistoryonparax@gmail.com. That is channelinghistory on parax@gmail.com. My latest book, Spirit Speaks, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. And we have made it readily available on Kindle. We've lowered the price to $2.99 for a Kindle copy. We're hoping that people will take advantage of it and listen to these wonderful messages. Signed copies of the books are only available on our website, spiritspredict.com, or wordsofgodthenandnow.com. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Thank you for listening. Please join us on Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the ParaX Radio Network.
And I would also like to thank you all for listening this evening and for the questions in the chat room. Have a wonderful week, and God bless you all.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.